Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pharmaceutical Soccer. We are here today. Unfortunate day for us here, as this is unfortunately has turned into a day of lament, a day of grief. I am here, of course, with Valer Shapilla. No, we are not mourning Clay Trainum not being here. No, Clay is alive and well. um, but we are mourning Nashville SC being in the playoffs. For the first time in Nashville SC history. Nashville has not made the playoffs and will officially miss the playoffs after a rough week of soccer matches. Valer, what's up?
Yeah, man. Well, yeah, Clay is not here. I don't know. I think he's looking at the job at Phoenix Rising at the moment. So he might be taking over that one over there. But second week in a row, Clay's missing this, which I think his commitment to this show is as much as Nashville SC's commitment to making the playoffs, which they want to be there, but they couldn't. Um, I don't know where this is going. No, you know what? You know what? Before we get into Nashville, I know we have a lot of Nashville to cover. So I'll just tell you about my weekend. And Steven, you're in town, so you can tell me about what you did back in Nashville. But I went to Louisville, and in Louisville, I went to my very first NWSL game. That's the National Women's Soccer League. I got to see Racing Louisville, which isn't a good team, play against Kansas City Current, who are a good team. So it was a good it was a good, nice matchup. That stadium there, Lynn Family Stadium, I think a lot of Nashville SC fans have been there for various things, maybe. But I think it's worth the trip. We did other things, my girlfriend and I in Louisville, and some tastings and stuff like that. Pretty nice city, pretty nice drive. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's a good weekend. Titans didn't lose, so that always makes me feel better. And then Arsenal won, so you gotta take the good, with the bad, I guess. But all in all, yeah, highly recommend just because this is a soccer show. I think it's good for anybody to make that 2.5, 3 hour drive and just watch a different league, different. Obviously, it's a women's league, so things are it's just different environment and. Or if you're really feeling it and you want to watch USL, that's a nice stadium to watch USL in. Louisville currently leads the Eastern Conference in USL, so you'll be watching probably a better product than what you would see with Nashville SC. So as we near the end of the season and Nashville SC doesn't have any more home games this year, if you want to get a quick fix of soccer, there's USL and NWSL in Louisville, as well as a bunch of other soccer around us. But that's just my suggestion here.
Yeah, we've always had a good time in Louisville for soccer. Obviously, Open Cup being there, but I've been there a couple times for USL matches. But that stadium has been a lot of fun to be around. Uh, just a good atmosphere, good people. People are extremely nice when it comes to Louisville fans. So I agree. Um,
Oh, and shout out to Will, who was an NSC fan who was there in Louisville also watching the game, and we ran into each other. So that's pretty cool.
Yay, Will, let's go. No, I've been took a quick little trip to Nashville this weekend, so that was kind of fun. Didn't really do much. I didn't really do anything, actually. I've honestly have just been here, just enjoying the vibes, being in the city. I went out to watch some football last on Saturday night, and that was depressing. Except it was not depressing for my team. We need to shout out the one and only Vanderbilt Commodores, anchored down for beating Alabama and then carrying the goalpost all the way to the river. That's a 3 mile hike, Flair, with that goalpost that they carried that thing all the way down into the river.
I have often talked about my ignorance when it comes to college sports, but even I understood I guess the importance of that win. I think even somebody like me who doesn't really know or follow or have any connection whatsoever to college sports can realize how big of a deal that was. So I guess shout out to them. I know their baseball team is good. That's what people tell me. So maybe now they'll have a football team. There you go.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that Nashville SC could not take the inspiration from our Vanderbilt Commodores to do what they needed to do. Um, but as we stated here, we had a dual week this week, of course. A lot of us already forgetting Wednesday night against DC. But before we even played the match on Sunday, based on the results from everybody else on Saturday, it was starting to look good at first. Inter Miami getting the win in the 93rd minute for Nashville. All the other results actually did end up going our way, besides one, which was DC United winning on Saturday, which officially eliminated Nashville and their chances from being in the playoff before we even played that match on Sunday. So when we do get into the matches, I think we're going to talk a lot less about the NYCFC game, just because of the fact that I think the Wednesday one is going to be the more important one when it comes to just the, I don't know, team dynamic and team just everything. Because I think there's a lot to say when it comes to Wednesday. Um, but your I kind of want to get you your just first overall thoughts about Nashville, when it was announced that Nashville would not be making the playoffs this year. What kind of went through your head in that matter?
I think I went straight back to the beginning of this year, and you look at the Nashville team that had a dip in form towards the end of last season, right? And but this was a team nonetheless in the Champions Cup. It was a team that had made the final a few months back of the Leagues Cup. It was a team that until then has found consistent MLS success in terms of the playoffs and has often found itself punching above its weight from what was expected from it. So when this season started, I think everybody and had a more positive outlook than what the result has shown towards the end of last season. Fast forward to now, and you find yourself Nashville out of the playoffs. And, I think with a lot of uncertainty in terms of what this team's trying to accomplish, what is the mentality of this team, and what is the identity of this team? What are they trying to do? So I think there's a lot of sort of relearning from Nashville SC fan perspective. I think a lot of stuff with Gary Smith is gone, and now you have BJ Callahan, but it looks like it's a team in between rebuild and then a team that's between win now and rebuild. And all of that went into my head because at the end of the day, this is sports, and in sports, winning matters, and in sports, making the playoffs matters. And when those goals are missed, um, I think it's gonna matter. Even though, yes, this is a rebuilding year. Yes, BJ Callahan has only been here a couple of months or whatever it may be, a few months. It's not gonna That's not gonna make it feel any better for Nashville SC fans, and nor should it make it feel any better for Nashville SC fans. This still sucks for everybody who's involved with Nashville SC, and it's not just the fans, by the way. I mean, the players are saying it themselves. I mean, we talked to Joe Willis last week, and this week, I guess last week as well, we talked to Walker Zimmerman, and they're not having a good time either. But that's gonna be the biggest challenge, I think, when you look at staying positive. For a fan perspective, you're really, it's hard to stay positive, and that's okay. But from a player perspective, they can't afford to let their head hang and just move on because a lot of them are playing for a contract. A lot of them are playing for the coach's trust for next year. And from everything we know, BJ Callahan is going to be the coach next year. So, as a professional, I think that's you can't just let this sort of be the end all for you. Even though there are 2 weeks for you to play a meaningless game in Chicago and then the season's over, you still have to show that you are capable of being a professional and performing at a high level.
Yeah, what do you think the least watched MLS game of the week is going to
That
be?
one.
It's definitely going to be Nashville, Chicago. To say does Chicago still doesn't have a chance? They're officially eliminated
No,
as
they're
well, correct?
eliminated. Yeah, they were eliminated before Nashville even. So yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that'll be a fun, really, Matt. And yeah, I think that's and especially with this week, I think, and it could be just a microcosm of looking at what this week of matches was, but my first thought was, where do you go from here? when it comes to this squad. And like, I think that's what Mike Jacobs is going to have to answer to. I think that's what BJ Callahan is going to have to answer to. I think that's what the players are going to have to figure out and answer to. Because I think you learned a decent amount about BJ Callahan this week. I think you learned about where the players' heads and mentality is this week. And I think you learned about the roster in totality itself not being built in the way that a successful team could be. And like, you're right, Valer. It, we could think all the pieces are there. We could think, all like you could always think that. Don't get me wrong, but the answers, the stats, the easy answer is, did you make the playoffs? Yes or no? And the answer is no. So
Right.
whatever you did this year did not work. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You did not make the playoffs for the first time in club history. What is currently going on is not working. And me personally, like just based on the way these matches went and just I don't I don't necessarily see a positive outlook. And it could be just because, again, we are in the grieving process. We are literally just going through this. But like, some of it's the unknown of like not knowing what the plan is. Some of it is just the outlook itself of like Wednesday was crushing when it comes to just any sort of perspective. Like that was probably one of the more crushing defeats I think I've seen ever in history with this team. Um, it's it, it's so weird to think about like being in this urgent position, like because we are in an urgent position and not knowing what the step forward is.
Yeah, and I think there are positives from in play you can take, but like don't let that distract you from the fact that this season was a complete failure for Nashville SC. You know what I mean? I mean, just because you pick up some positives here and there, and there are some good moves. Hiring BJ Callahan, I believe, was a good move for Nashville SC. All that to say, this doesn't change the fact that this season was a complete failure in every measure of that word. And maybe Nashville SC will try to spin it. I don't know. Maybe they'll try to say, no, it wasn't a failure. We're introducing Nashville SC 2.0 or whatever it may be. You can't drop from the level Nashville SC was at to where they are right now within a season and not categorize it as a failure. And that's just simply fact. And you're right, Stephen. You look at the point, you look at the goals, you look at just on the pitch play. I mean, I don't. This is a veteran team. This is something Clay talked about on Twitter actually yesterday or 2 days ago. Um, but this is supposed to be a veteran team that doesn't make these mistakes. And yet here they are making those mistakes that veteran teams are not supposed to make, which to me is an alarming thing. So whether or not you want to focus on the positives from the pitch, and yeah, there were some positives. There's build-up play. There's Hani Mukhtar getting back to form. All those are positives. At the end of the day, those positives are hard to focus at when you are so terrible that you didn't make the 17-team playoffs, or actually, I guess it's 18-team playoffs from both conferences. I mean, if you can't be good enough to be top nine in the East, you have failed in your season. And let's not get it twisted. That is just as simple as that. If you have not been able to achieve top nine in the East to get you at least a playing spot, you have failed in your season. And that's that. Are there positives? Sure. But you can take those positives and still acknowledge that it's a failure of a season. And that's where that's where I'm at least.
And this is how you know Valer has turned way more into a responsible analyst and reporter because I literally thought I thought he was going to say you could take those positives and shove them up somewhere. I thought that's where you were going specifically with that. Because that's the Valer I know specifically. But I appreciate your candor now. Look at you. If there's any positive, it's your growth over the year.
Catch me without a mic at a bar somewhere. Maybe maybe things will be different.
I love the conversation that we had on Twitter, and I totally forgot about like who said it. So like shout out to you if it's hey, what you have the answer? How did this downfall happen so quickly? And your response was, give me 3 to 5 hours and a couple of beers. I can
Yeah.
hopefully explain it to you. But no, look, this sucks. There's no way this sucks, and we don't have all the answers. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this. I think next week it'll actually be. I hope Clay is back next week because I think actually going into some of the small positives of the season may not be a bad thing to do. I think we're going to take the time to reflect and all that type of stuff because this sucks, and there's no easy way to spin that. There's no positive. This sucks. This season's a failure. Um, but I think I think there's some things that we can take out of it. But we have to talk about the week that we did have. We have to talk about DC United at home. We have to talk about NYCFC. I can talk about NYCFC for the first 30 seconds. So we can just get into that when we talk about that. And we're going to do that next, right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we are back right here at Pharmaceutical Soccer at Pharma Soccer on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And you may know that we have a Patreon as well. If you go check that out, Pharmaceutical Soccer, Pharma Soccer on Patreon, you can help support the show. It's only $5 a month. We're going to be doing a decent amount of stuff during the off season when it comes to Patreon. We want to keep the hype up for this team this season, no matter what. Even if it's hard to do, we're still gonna go through it. So join our misery and sign up for our Patreon. That we are going to as we continue to cover this team throughout the entire off season. But look, we had a busy week, 2 matches to cover. I think we have to start with DC, just because I think that is the more important match to. Well, it obviously is the important match because it lost us any shot of being in the playoffs. So Nashville losing 4-3 at home to DC United. The first thing I would like to say, anybody that was when Gary Smith was originally talked about being fired, when they're like, God, I'd rather lose 4-3 than 1-0. How are you feeling now? I just want to ask that question. How are you feel? Because this is what it feels like to lose 4-3. This is not good. This is not fun whatsoever. Um, but the weird thing is with this match, until the last 25 minutes or so, there was a decent amount of positives to take away in the beginning. Um, and I think Alex Mouil is one of those that you could start out with when it comes to the way that he was playing, and then Hani Mukhtar as well.
Yeah, I mean, the DC match, if you take away a couple of defensive sort of mistakes, this is all before the 90th minute mark at 3-1. You looked at this Nashville SC team, a point off the playoffs position. That's where they were at the 90th minute of this match. That's where Nashville SC were, a point off the playoff season. Alex Mouil with a brace, Hani Mukhtar was with a goal and assist, and it was really all shaping up to be a really really positive, almost like dreamland level of results for Nashville SC, because everything else around them kind of started working out. Um, and no, they wouldn't have been guaranteed a playoff spot, but they would have been a lot closer. And when you look at Sam Surridge, you look at Jacob Schaffelberg, you look at Yazbek, he was playing so well. Defensively, Nashville did let in that one goal, but you really kind of start thinking, at 3-2 especially, that they are able to bunker down and just close it out. What ends up happening is that DC puts in some substitutions through. BJ Callahan takes a minute with his substitution. He takes a little bit of time to put in his subs. And then he goes into a back five, which I don't think it's a bad choice. I don't think anybody listening to this would be necessarily saying that Nashville shouldn't have gone to a back five. The thing is, I got a comment on Instagram that was like, parking the bus never works. And my answer to that was that parking the bus works, but you have to actually park the bus, which is not to let in 2 free shots at the end of the game. That's not parking the bus. That's bad defending. Like you have to, if you're gonna park the bus, you have to commit to the act and park the bus and make it difficult to break you down. Those 2 goals Nashville conceded were not difficult to concede. They were free shots essentially. And Benteke is the one who is making these things work because he's pulling natural defenders with him. And I totally understand. But man, even at 3-2, even at 3-2, you just can't switch off like that if you're the Nashville defense. This is your do or die moment. This is it. And that was my complaint about the New England game. Where was the urgency there? When you're 1-0 down, your season's on the line. Literally, you need points, you need a win, and there was just no urgency. And I think that's the one thing that BJ Callahan really needs to balance. His team seemed to have this sort of the start point of the game where they are just going at it. And in the first 10 minutes, we're just suffocating DC. I mean, DC couldn't even get anything. And then there are these periods within the game where they just Nashville SC is just just unbothered by the pressure the opponents are putting. And there just doesn't the middle ground there. He just can't seem to find out whether that's from the players not being able to take the instruction or whether that's something the coaching needs to do better. Regardless, we just see Nashville SC at 100 and we see them at like 20%. And we never see them at like a solid 60, 70 week in, week out. And that's, I think, what eventually is going to got them out of the playoffs. If that balance, if BJ Callahan is able to harness that balance or achieve that balance, I think you start looking at a very competent team. Because again, as we talk about, there are positives like Alex Muyl and Hani Mukhtar and Sam Surridge being able to build up play, and Abel Gidoy looked good. There are just that all of that doesn't matter when you give it away, and that is a very generous word. Now there are other words you can use when you give it away so easily at the end there.
I mean, they gave away the win. They absolutely gave that away. There's no reason the fact that Pirani should be coming in and literally be unmarked in both goals, sitting in Nashville's box, by the way. Like, it's not like he was in some, like we didn't have two bangers be scored on us. This dude was unmarked in the box. And it's extremely unfortunate to see. And, like, I I don't think, like, I saw the quote from Club and Country about, about BJ Callahan specifically, that kind of being on him. I don't necessarily think um, a lot of this season is not. I don't think any of this season is directly reflected on BJ Callahan. I don't think, but I do think there might be a little bit of inexperience being shown up in these final matches of the season when it comes to his coaching. Now, this could be a quick lesson to be learned based on this. But in all reality, when it comes to team mentality, like their players do have their own responsibility when it comes to being mentally stable and prepared to play the game. Uh, I think BJ Callahan also has a direct responsibility when it comes to the team's mentality. And you could tell that mentality is not fixed even going to the NYCFC game when you let in a goal in the first 20 seconds off of just a player running. Like
18 seconds.
19, sorry, my bad. I added
18.
18, sorry, my bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like your team was not turned on. Like they just and I think some of that could just be based on the inexperience. Some of that could be just on the season itself. Like it was an exhausting season for these players, and I understand that. But the mentality of this team is going to need to switch if anything is going to change whatsoever. It is I'm like, it's weird because I think we're going to talk about like in the terms of like actual structure and skill set when it comes to this team, more during the offseason when we see, what happens when it comes to certain players, being moved on or what players we do bring in. But when you look at the outside looking in, especially going up 3-1, even 3-2, you see the talent and the skill of this squad. And we've seen it a few times with BJ as well. But you cannot be doing what you did against DC if anything is going to change. And I hope, I hope the team I hope there's one thing this team can do by going into Chicago and playing a meaningless game is go in and absolutely win, get at least some sort of baseline mentality structure to go into, the off season, because there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of things that need to be figured out during the off season. Yeah,
Yeah.
and just I think we could just kind of segue into NYCFC, just because of the fact that we could just talk about that really quick. Um,
Y- You already did, so we don't. I mean, we'll talk about it, and you already kind of explained what happened there that I think set the tone for the rest of the match. I do want to note on the BJ Callahan thing. I mean, it never made sense to me that Nashville SC were saying they're a win now team, and they're going for a coach who's never been a head coach before. I mean, you you can't do both. I just don't think it makes sense. And I do want to shout out Ben Wright. He wrote a really good piece on Broadway Sports about kind of this season and how it went for Nashville SC. So I'd highly recommend reading that. And you just it's hard to convince me that you want to be a win now team with a core of players that is at a certain age and then bring in a young coach who has never coached a team before as a head coach, you know? And I don't I'm not questioning BJ Callahan. I think he actually has what it takes to be a head coach in MLS, but he is gonna go through these moments like you said, Stephen, learning lessons. And he's going to have to learn these things on the job, and that's okay for a young coach. That's even Mikel Arteta at Arsenal went through this at the highest level in the Premier League, right? So this is not a surprise to anyone. Lampard never went through it. I mean, he went through the moments, but he never learned. So anyway, all that said, but like when you have and you know when you see it all the time with these new coaches that they either thrive or they kind of they are unable to switch into that head coaching role. And I think BJ Callen has the potential to thrive because we've seen it, like Steven said, against NYCFC, against like that second half against NYCFC was so good for Nashville SC. And yes, of course, game state, NYCFC was sitting back, they weren't going forward as much, but Nashville SC looked so good in that second half. The first 10 minutes of every single game before NYCFC, Nashville SC has looked so good, right? And it's like these moments, if they can just capitalize, make them longer, extend the period where they are in control of the game. His ability. I'm just saying for a first-time head coach, there are going to be learning lessons. And for Nashville SC to act like this is some sort of like win now and we're going to win now with this first-time head coach, it's just it's an oxymoron to me. I mean, it doesn't make sense. You can't have both. So I don't know. Maybe next season things will be different. The other thing, obviously, which we're not going to go into this episode at all, is like getting the players he needs, getting him that support he needs. This is all secondary. We're not going to go into that today because we're still talking about this season. But NYCFC, I thought Nashville was the better team.
yeah, I honestly I turned it off after that goal was scored. The NYCFC, I turned it off. I was like, cool. I'm not going to put myself through this. I'm not going to get more upset about not making the playoffs than I already am. So yeah, I figured there'd be some sort of response. I just didn't think it would be fully opposite the other way. And like Valeria, you're absolutely right. That second, like coming back that second half, um, that's what you expect to see. Nashville did look so good at those times and experiences. It's just how do you continue that? And like I think that's the question that I asked in the first segment as well of where does this team go from here? Like what is the priority in the offseason? Like what does this team need to do? And I think there's going to be some time to figure it out because this team, you guys get a longer break now. Congratulations. Now that you're not in the playoffs, you do get a longer break here to figure some stuff out, but you have a lot of questions to figure out when it's with this team. If you had to put like your number one, like the number one, like what your main priority right now for this team would be, what would that be?
Roster restructure. I mean, it's a loaded one, and that could take one window, that could take six windows. But the roster doesn't replicate the roster doesn't respond to what BJ Callahan wants to do, and the roster doesn't respond to winning, meaning that something has to change within that roster for at least either the coach to get the players he need or for the team to do better. And what what Mike Jacobs has said over and over whenever he goes on any media is that this is an MLS Cup winning roster. And I urge Nashville SC and all of its fans to get realistic because this is not an MLS Cup winning roster. This is nowhere near that. This is a team that's missing the playoffs roster. So get realistic would be the first priority is that realistically, where is Nashville SC right now? And I'm talking about people internally working for the club. Realistically, you have to look at yourself and say, what we have built so far didn't get us where we needed. So clearly we did something wrong. How can we correct those wrongs? And look, MLS is a parity league, and we've seen Cincinnati go from okay.
Okay, yeah. So, like, obviously, we're going to talk a lot more about it, but for you specifically, for Valer, like, what is the one priority from this team that you do have?
I think the first thing is the roster and restructuring the roster. I think that will be the most important thing for Nashville SC because the roster doesn't respond well to what BJ Callahan wants to do and doesn't respond well to winning. And I think that's the first thing that Nashville SC needs to do. Internally, they need to be realistic for what they have. Mike Jacobs has gone out publicly and said multiple times that this is an MLS Cup winning team. It is not an MLS Cup winning team. It's a team that's missing the playoffs. So you have to get realistic and you have to know what you have and realize that you made mistakes along the way to get there and realize and try to figure out how to correct those mistakes. Now, look, I'm not saying this is the end of the world and Nashville SC will never make the playoffs again because this is MLS, this is a parity league. We've seen Cincinnati go from wooden spoon to a supporter shield in like a year and a half, and we've seen it with so many times. But if you have a bad season next season, if you have a bad start to the season, you start to fall into that San Jose, Chicago, even Austin recently, that mold of teams that just can't seem to figure it out. And if you get stuck in that cycle, it is a lot harder to get out of it. So the earlier you find out who you are, and the earlier you admit to yourself that what you did was wrong building this roster, and maybe figure out how to correct those mistakes, the earlier you are able to rebuild actually and give BJ Callahan something to work with.
And in some of that, like I think we talked about it during the season, and I think Ben's article on Broadway is probably reflective of that. Like some of that we started too late with this process. Like some of that has already started too late, and I do think it's interesting, especially from a roster perspective. Like, do I think possibly at the beginning of the year this was a championship winning roster? Maybe. Do I think at the beginning of last year was this roster a championship winning roster? Yes, I do. Look what happened at the end of the season, though. That's not it anymore.
Yeah.
Like the reality doesn't necessarily have to be the same. A lot of these players are different. Where Shaq Moore started at the beginning of last year to where Shaq Moore is right now is insane to me. And something needs to figure out like Randall Leal, like what is actually going to be happening with that? Like there is a lot of questions to be figured out when it comes to this team. And I think it's going to be taking. I think roster is going to be an extreme priority, but I think there's going to be you got to take a step back. You got to take a step back and try to reflect and try and get an understanding of what is going on. Because currently, they are doing a bunch of referrals and stuff for season tickets. There was supposed to be a season ticket wait list for God knows how long. The stadium has not looked full since the beginning of the season. Like there is a lot of over reflecting questions that do have to be asked. And I think, and I think the leadership is going to have a lot to deal with and talk about into what is starting all of that. Is it the mentality? Is it the mentality of the fans? Is it the mentality of the team itself? Is it the roster? Like, I think there is going to be, again, there's going to be a lot. It's so hard to pick down to what one thing is going to matter to you.
If
But
you are Nashville SC and you are John Ingram or Mike Jacobs or Ian Ayre, any of those guys, you are thanking the stars and all the gods that there's no relegation in MLS. because that would have been catastrophic for a team like this to build a
Yep.
stadium like that and to respond with it like that. And the only reason it's not catastrophic yet is because there's no relegation. I can't say that word apparently, but I'm not going to go into that debate of promotion relegation or anything of those sorts. But this is the only reason why it's not catastrophic is because MLS is a parity league and you can bring those fans back just like you lost them. Now, to be
Right.
fair, that's not an easy thing to do. But you're right, Steven. That stadium has looked empty. That's a 30,000 seated stadium, biggest soccer specific stadium in the US that they can't fill at the moment. And they can't even get halfway full. I know they keep announcing 26,000, but like, let's be realistic, guys. Like, it's not 26,000.
It hasn't been.
It's
There's
not
no
even
way it has
20,000.
been.
I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and talk about the numbers, but it's just it it is absolutely it's a classic case of fumbling the bag. Nashville SC had the bag and they fumbled the bag, and that's where I stand on this. After the Leagues Cup final, even though they lost that, they had such a buzz around them in this city, and everything following that has been just abysmal.
Oh
And
yeah, the literal buzz from not winning a trophy was insane. Like
yeah,
the actual buzz that the city had for not winning a trophy was crazy. There was soccer radio shows and all this stuff happening, and now you probably can't even turn on local radio and have any sort of conversation behind it whatsoever, because we are where I don't know the Preds were at 5 to 10 years ago, 10 years ago when I don't want Nashville SC to get into non relative fashion with the city and just kind of fade out, which is why I think there's a lot more questions than just like obviously winning helps, but like the whole organization and the whole structure of things. If you would know that you're rebuilding for something coming up, you can still get behind that, right? Like if you know you're in a rebuild, you can get behind that.
yeah.
If you know that, hey, there was just some things that happened this year, next year is going to be great, you could get behind that in some way, shape, or form. I am having a really hard time getting behind whatever the plan is going forward in the offseason. And that is, and I think I probably have a little bit, I don't know if I share a general consensus with everybody else in Nashville in that when it comes to Nashville soccer. But that's the way how I feel personally.
No, I think a lot of fans are confused. You're right, because like you mentioned the Preds. The Preds last season were very clear that that is a rebuilding year. So the fact that even like made the playoffs was like, oh my God, they made a playoffs in the rebuilding year. Like that's good. Where the Preds was like getting to the Stanley Cup final. So like I think you need to be clear in your plan as Nashville SC starting now, because you can't get fans behind you if you're just in the middle ground of like, oh, we're gonna win all the trophies, even though our coach has only like 10 games of head coaching experience. Like you can't do that. Like it's unrealistic. And our players are underperforming, and some of these players are, we went into the reasons. I don't want to keep repeating myself. There's gonna be like at least 3 or 4 podcast episodes about the fall of Nashville SC and how to fix it. So like I don't wanna keep yapping about it, but I think we're in a good place for today, I think.
Our soon to be Netflix documentary series on the downfall of Nashville SC and where it is in rankings of sports soccer problems. Hey, we didn't win the wooden spoon, so that's good. Go for us. Yay,
Shout
Nashville
out
for
San
not winning
Jose.
wooden. Shout out San Jose. Okay, we are in an international break, so again, this is like honestly now this is just cruel though, in a funny way of like having to wait a full week and a half,
Yeah.
2 weeks before we watch a meaningless game of soccer again. I do think the international break though is interesting. Jacob Schaffelberg, of course, getting called up for Canada. Gives himself another chance to highlight how good of a player he is, to other suitors probably out there. I'm sure that's going to be on his mind in some way, shape, or form. And then I also think from a U.S. perspective, it's Pochettino's first camp and match and series of matches as the U.S. men's soccer manager, which I think is going to be extremely interesting to see how this team performs, especially in the start. it's exciting. We knew what it was like when BJ Callahan came on for that first match. Even though you don't necessarily know what to expect, the excitement is there. Is there anything specifically that does excite you from this international window coming up, Flair?
Well, I think we need to talk about Jacob Schaffelberg obviously made the team, but also Anibal Godoy with Panama, and Patrick Yazbek has been called up to the Australian national team. So Australia is in a World Cup qualifier, so it's a little more important than the friendlies that Panama, Canada, and the US are playing. I don't know where Patrick Yazbek is in terms of the depth chart, if you would, of Australia, but I obviously watch the Asian qualifiers pretty heavily, so I'll be able to tell you maybe afterwards. And then in terms of Panama and Canada, they play each other, and then Panama also plays the U.S. So you'll have a chance to watch Anibal Godoy versus Jacob Schaffelberg potentially, and Anibal Godoy versus the USMNT. Yeah, I think it's exciting time for the USMNT to have Pochettino there. I think it's gonna be I don't know if it's gonna tell a whole lot, but the two games are Panama and Mexico, I believe, for the US. So, two regional sort of games that the US two teams they've struggled with. So we'll see how they do and how they go with that. But and then also let's not forget later on this month, the US women's national team will be in town at Geodis Park. So make sure to get your ticket for that. I know we'll have more opportunities to kind of promo that, so we'll talk about it as well. Um, yeah, I think I'm done. I don't think I have anything else.
That was great. Personally, like
Yeah.
I actually, you talking about international soccer, it's normally like just trying to get random stuff out of you. So it's very nice that you were able to go down that way. I'm proud of you, actually.
Yeah, I'm good like that.
All right. I'm glad you're good like that. Am I potentially stalling because I'm trying to figure out because as we do even though Nashville does not have a match this weekend, we normally do a prediction in our shows. We'll be back next week. So am I stalling currently to try and figure out what we should predict for our episode today? Sure,
We should
absolutely.
predict who wins MLS Cup.
You want to do that right now?
Yeah.
Sure, Valair, take us out. You give us your plugs, give us your everything. We don't have anything else to talk about. I don't want to
Mi-
get let's just do it. Fine.
Miami won the Supporters Shield, and also I will give you one more nugget of information before I give you my prediction. The Orlando Pride won the NWSL Supporters Shield without losing a single game so far in the season. They're on record to be the most historic, best team in NWSL history. So check them out. Marta from Brazil plays for them. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with her. But yeah, they have a few more games to go this season, so it's not over yet. But currently, they don't have a loss, and they have the Supporters Shield by 10 points clear already. So shout out to them, I guess. Um, I will say, follow me at Valer Shabilla on Twitter, Threads, and Instagram. Also, sign up for the foot golf tournament at ki615.org and at kicking615 on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We need you there. Come play foot golf. It's a lot of fun. And I think actually the Columbus Crew will win the MLS Cup again over winning against Inter Miami in the Eastern Cup final, in the Eastern Conference final, and then going to play somebody else from the West for MLS Cup. I'm gonna go. You know what? I'm gonna go with LAFC. I think it's gonna be a repeat of last season, and I think Columbus is gonna pull it again.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah, at PH Steven HD on my stuff, but mainly go follow the foot golf tournament. Like it's a lot of fun. I wish I was in town for that. Like I wish I could be back in town for that. I literally love the foot golf tournament so much. So go check that out. Go sign up for that. Um, I actually agree with you about the final, Valair. I do believe that Columbus is too good of a team, has too high a quality. Um, I think I mean you could even look at Wednesday where I think Miami winning on Wednesday was not correct. I do think Columbus was actually the better team in that match. I do think there was a lot of hijinks involved in that. But I do think LAFC will actually win the MLS Cup this year. I just think they're too good of a team, too good a quality. LA Galaxy does have a shot. It will be a really fun playoff experience, though, in the West when it comes to Galaxy and LAFC meeting up. So I'm kind of excited for that.
And that's the one thing to look forward to. If you don't watch Nashville, you can watch the other playoff matches, obviously, with
Yeah,
the
if you
other
want to watch actually good soccer happening in MLS, like it is there. I promise you it is there. There's going to be a lot of stories when actual playoff lineups happen in a week and a half when it's decision day. And I love decision day and I don't have anything to be excited about. And this is not, anyways. All right. Thank you so much again for listening to the show. Appreciate it. We'll be back next week, hopefully with Clay. There is an international break this week, but I still feel like we probably have a lot to talk about next week when it comes to the team. So we will be back. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you later. Enjoy your international break.